Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to add to my serious concerns from yesterday regards the rollout of the COVID vaccine in the UK. And I'd like to discuss the concerns of a British-based epidemiologist who explain how, that light at the end of the COVID tunnel may actually just be a train coming the other way. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, the situation in the UK remains extremely serious. The rate of infection continues to climb at a very steep gradient. It's high in other countries around Europe as well, and around some other countries in the world. The government have blamed the new variant on this explosion in new cases. They are, of course, leaning heavily on that in order to avoid blame for their mishandling. But two things to still bear in mind. So one, viruses, just like all organisms, mutate as they propagate. The more the virus is allowed to propagate, the more mutations occur. The more mutations occur, the more likely it is that a mutation occurs that changes the biological nature of the virus, because not all mutations do that. The more of these biological changes occur, the more likely it is that one of them will be a change that is advantageous to the virus. In other words, allows it to spread more easily, furthering its survival. The fact that we allowed the virus to get completely out of hand in this country has directly led to the ideal conditions for the virus to mutate into a more effective strain. This new variant wasn't bad luck. It was an accident waiting to happen. But I also point out that even government ministers, I still see Matt Hancock referring to it as a variant, which is, I believe, correct. Not a strain. It may be a strain, but it's like when we know that. What it is, basically a variant means that we know that it's biologically different. A strain would mean that those biological differences are having some impact on its physiology. And I referred to a leading virologist recently who argued caution because we haven't actually carried out the experiments to really test that hypothesis. We can't prove it's a new strain. But we can still behave as if it definitely is. There is a fear that it is a new strain, and even if we can't prove it, if it does transmit at what is believed to be about 56% more effectively than the one that kicked our ass in 2020, then that is a very serious problem. The second thing to bear in mind is that this isn't just contained within the UK. It's been found in other parts of the world, along with similar variants that developed independently elsewhere. Remember that the key reason why this coronavirus is so difficult to tackle, unlike previous versions, is that it has a long incubation period and most infected people never develop symptoms. Now you combine this with easy international travel and a new variant can be spread around different countries before you even become aware of its existence. So Dr. Gurdasani, who was writing a Twitter thread to explain the seriousness of the situation, noted that the spread of this new variant was still rising even during our second national lockdown. So in other words, what's happening here, we had a lockdown in November, this variant was propagating then. Under that lockdown, this variant, the rise of infections continued to grow. Of the other one, it didn't. The previous strain, that went down, but this one went up. Basically, what we're saying is if we had another national lockdown along the same lines as the one we had in November, that wouldn't control the infection rate. Not of this new strain, if we can call it that. I'll call it variant because that's what we're certain of, but it is believed to be a new strain. We would need something tougher than that lockdown. What we have is less stringent. We have most of England in tier 4 now, which is very similar to the last lockdown, but the variant has spread. And even tier 4 is not believed to be enough because that's no tougher than our second lockdown. So the rise in infections will continue. Even if everywhere were to be placed in tier 4, which could only cover England, of course, we know this variant has gone beyond England, but the other administrations can deal with that. Even if we put the whole of England in tier 4, which may well happen quite soon, that is still only going to suppress the transmission of the old strain, not the new one. And that is why experts were calling for schools and colleges to remain closed, because that is a major source of transmission. But that is not happening. Another thing about this new variant is it's believed to transmit much more easily amongst much younger people as well. So The government tried to argue for, say, primary schools just to open normally because our young kids don't transmit it as well. Well, with this new strain, that's not necessarily true. So what we're saying is it's a race against time to get people vaccinated then. The government are not going to manage this situation. It's out of control. They have no intention of getting it back under control. For whatever political reasons, they won't do that. So we need to vaccinate everyone really quickly. Here's the next thing that really worries me. So Dr. Gurdasani says that now, with things as they are, we're likely to need a vaccine uptake of about 90% to get the R value below 1. Remember, when the R value is above 1, that means the R value represents, so if you're infected, it's the average number of people you will pass that infection on to. So if it's above 1, it means the number of cases just grows. It has to grow because every person is infecting on average more than one other person. If it's below 1, then it's contracting because every person on average infects less than one other person. So to get the R value below 1, we're going to need to vaccinate. We believe, obviously this is based on modelling, about 90% of the population. We don't actually know the exact figure. Two problems with that to my mind. One, the more people need vaccinating, the longer it will take. You'd be talking about the need to vaccinate 60 million people if you need 90% of the population. Now, the government said they'd be vaccinating 2 million people per week. So that alone would take 60 weeks. Remember, you need 2 doses. So you need 2 sets of vaccinations per person to be given maximum protection. So 60 weeks would take us well into 2022. Straight away, how would people feel about that? That we still won't have got the vaccination up to the level required even in a year's time. But we're not vaccinating 2 million people a week. Nowhere near, in fact. And what's more, we have no plans to get up to that point anytime soon. Yeah, it's a vague aim, but there's no plan for it. So don't get me wrong. I'm sure that our current level of incompetence will still allow for growth in that area. We will get better. I think that. We may not get up to the 2 million a week. We may do. Who knows? But the longer it takes to ramp up our capacity, the longer it will also take to achieve. And what of the fact that, as I say, it's believed that we might need to be vaccinated twice a year. You know, because the antibodies don't last forever. It's not a case of vaccinating someone and they're protected for life. That I know. The antibodies are only believed to last not even a year. So we might need vaccinating twice a year. So we don't currently have a plan to vaccinate 60 million people. In fact, the government have said that they will ease restrictions. We'll be leaving the tier system as soon as the 15 million most vulnerable are done. That's what they're saying at the moment. Now, they have changed their minds before, but that is the plan at the moment. That would leave the rest of us to face up to, even if not death, even if the majority of us are unlikely to die if we contract COVID, there's the long-term health impact of catching COVID, even if it doesn't kill you. With COVID, it's not a case of what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. No, the reverse. The second massive problem, of course, with vaccinating 9% of the population is confidence. I don't think we have as serious an anti-vaxxer movement in the UK as in the US, but there is one. In addition, those who are opposed to vaccinations in general may be sceptical of this particular one. The government has lost the trust of the public, and that will have serious consequences for vaccine uptake. People may be more inclined to believe random nutters on the internet than the government. That's a very serious prospect. The government has said that it will not force anyone to have the vaccine. It will be voluntary. Okay, that's absolutely the position you would take early on, and it's the position I believe that a libertarian conservative government would wish to maintain. Now, if we needed something like 60% uptake, I can see that being possible. I can see a lot of people being eager to have this vaccine. 90%, I'm not sure that is possible on a voluntary basis at the moment. And if that is what's needed, I'm not saying you'd have to force people to have it, but you would not need a major campaign launched to persuade people, to change people's minds. I do not believe that 90% of the population right now would be happy being vaccinated. And the problem with needing a campaign like this, I'm really not sure you'd want Boris Johnson's fingerprints on it, because look at how well he's made support for the union in Scotland go this year. Can we not have him involved in any COVID campaigns, please? But remember, this isn't just an isolated problem in countries that don't take it serious. It's global. And it will remain global until it's beaten globally. Because you can have one country that basically eradicates it, only to have a visitor from somewhere where it's been happily spreading and mutating, and suddenly it's not eradicated anymore. Until this thing is beaten in every single country, it's not truly beaten any country. And although this new variant is believed to still be susceptible to the vaccine, what if a new variant emerged that was not? We'd have to develop another vaccine. We really don't want to be getting into that sort of territory. And then as you read the thread, which I'll link below, of course, Dr. Gurdasani talks about another mutation that potentially makes it even more transmissible over and above what was believed before. I mean, the bottom line is that in terms of our best available information, we cannot control this thing without making schools COVID safe. Again, like they point out, and this person pointed out, it's not about closing schools or opening schools. It's about making schools safe, but we may need to close them until they're safe, which they are not. Despite what the government say, they are not COVID safe. I'm a teacher, and the fact is that the Department for Education rules for schools and colleges are no more stringent than for a pub or a restaurant. Except pubs and restaurants are largely closed now in most of the country, but schools are open. And what is more, despite the announcement on changes from the Education Secretary, there are no plans to actually make schools more COVID secure. There are plans to not have as many pupils going back to school next week. There are no plans to change the way schools and colleges operate. So we're basically buggered. And the vaccine can only possibly come to our rescue if we can vaccinate maybe 90% of the population, which would require a massively accelerated rate of rollout, as well as a campaign to persuade people to take it. There isn't any sign at the moment, as far as I can see, of either of these things. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.